The first time I kissed my boss, it wasn't because I wanted to, it was because I was drunk, heartbroken, and stupidly thought she wouldn't remember. Turns out she remembered everything. I was a junior designer at Silverline Media, a sleek PR agency in downtown Los Angeles where ambition was the dress code and emotions were weaknesses. My boss, Victoria Hale, was the kind of woman who could stop time just by walking into a room. Power looked effortless on her posture, her voice, even the way her heels struck the floor sounded like authority. People either feared her or adored her. I did both. That night, the night everything changed, was supposed to be nothing more than the company's annual gala. Champagne, fake smiles, and polite networking. I had just gotten dumped by my girlfriend of 3 years and decided to drown my sorrows in cheap wine and bad decisions. Victoria noticed. She always did. "You look like you lost a war," she said, appearing beside me with a glass of something far too expensive for my paycheck. Her tone was teasing, but her eyes, God, those steel gray eyes were softer than I'd ever seen them. "Maybe I did," I muttered. "A war with myself." She tilted her head. "Then you should know that surrender can be beautiful, if you do it to the right person." I laughed, but it came out brittle. "Are you flirting with me, Miss Hale?" Her smile was small. "Would that be a problem, Miss Carson?" The next thing I knew, we were outside under the city lights. I don't remember who leaned in first. Maybe it was me. Maybe it was her, but when our lips met, the world stopped pretending. It was fire and silence and everything I didn't know I needed. I woke up the next morning in her penthouse. Panic came first, then shame. My dress lay crumpled by the sofa. She was already awake, standing by the window in nothing but a silk robe, sipping coffee like it was any other morning. "Good morning," she said calmly, as if we hadn't crossed every professional and moral boundary known to humankind. "Oh my God," I whispered. This can't, I mean, you're my boss." "I'm aware," she said, eyes not leaving the skyline. "But you're also the only person I've ever wanted to wake up next to in years. So forgive me if I'm not apologizing." That's when I realized something terrifying. She wasn't playing a game. Over the next few weeks, everything became a blur of stolen glances, cautious smiles, and long silences filled with things we didn't dare to say. She started calling me into her office more often, sometimes to discuss projects, other times just to talk. She'd ask about my art, my family, my dreams. She listened. And somehow that was more dangerous than the kiss. One Friday evening after everyone had left, she asked me to stay and review a campaign. The air between us was heavy, charged. I was trembling before she even touched me. "Why are you afraid of this?" she asked quietly, stepping closer. "Afraid of me? I'm afraid of what you make me feel," I admitted. "You make me want things I'm not supposed to." Her fingers brushed against my cheek. "Who told you you're not supposed to?" I looked into her eyes, and every rule I'd ever known unraveled. The second kiss was slower, more deliberate. This time I wasn't drunk. This time I meant it. But loving Victoria wasn't easy. She carried her heart like a locked briefcase, secure, elegant, impossible to open without the right key. Sometimes she'd hold me like I was the only thing keeping her alive. Other times she'd go days without a text. She'd build walls, then apologize in whispers I could barely hear. Once I found her crying in her office. Her father had passed away, a man she hadn't spoken to in years. I wrapped my arms around her, and for the first time she didn't resist. She leaned into me like she'd forgotten how to be held. "I don't know how to do this," she said through quiet tears. "I've built everything alone. I don't know how to need someone." "You don't have to know," I whispered. "Just let me stay." But the world doesn't love women like us. Not when one of us signs the paychecks. Rumors started to spread, first whispers, then accusations. People stared longer in meetings. HR sent concerned emails. I tried to act normal, but Victoria, she became colder, distant. The warmth in her eyes faded behind professionalism and fear. One afternoon, she called me into her office. Her tone was clipped. Whatever this issue's to stop," she said. I felt the ground collapse beneath me. "Because of them? Because of me," she said, her voice breaking. "Because I can't protect you from this world, and I won't be the reason your career burns." "So you're ending it to save me?" I asked bitterly. "Or because you're scared?" She didn't answer. She just turned away. That night I cried harder than I ever had. Not because I lost her, but because for the first time in my life I had loved someone without restraint, and it still wasn't enough. Weeks passed. We avoided each other, drowning in silence. She stopped calling me into her office. I stopped looking up when she walked by. But love has a cruel way of refusing to die. One night I was working late. The office was dark except for my desk lamp. I was halfway through a presentation when the elevator doors opened. Victoria stepped out, still in her blazer, eyes red. "I can't do it," she said simply. "I can't keep pretending that I don't feel everything when I see you." I froze. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'd rather lose the company than lose you." She crossed the room, and before I could speak, she kissed me softly, desperately, like someone who had finally stopped fighting herself. And in that moment I knew. This wasn't about power or rebellion or rules. It was about two souls who found each other in a world that told them not to. The night she kissed me again in the empty office, everything that had been broken between us began to glow, fragile, trembling but alive. I remember the sound of her breath against mine, the soft clatter of her necklace when she reached for me, the way she whispered my name like it was a confession. But reality has claws. By Monday morning, the rumor had evolved into a headline. CEO Victoria Hale accused of workplace affair. It spread across social media like wildfire. Silverline Media's PR department, the same one that once built untouchable reputations, was now scrambling to save its own. I sat frozen at my desk, the words on the screen blurring through my tears. My phone buzzed nonstop, friends, coworkers, even my mother asking, "Is it true?" Victoria didn't come in that day. Or the next. When she finally did, her face looked carved out of marble, beautiful but cold. Her hair pulled tight, her eyes unreadable. The office fell silent when she walked through the door. I caught her gaze for a split second, but she looked away before I could even stand. By afternoon, HR summoned me. They wanted statements, timelines, evidence. They wanted me to confirm the story or deny it. I lied. I said nothing happened. I said she was a mentor, nothing more. The man across the table, a senior partner named Coleman, smirked, like he didn't believe a word. "Miss Carson, I suggest you think very carefully before protecting someone who might not protect you." His words stung because they were true. I didn't know if Victoria would protect me. Later that night, I went to her penthouse. She opened the door before I could knock twice. Her makeup was gone. Her eyes were rimmed red. For the first time, she looked small, like the armor she wore every day had finally cracked. "Why didn't you answer my calls?" I asked. "I didn't know what to say," she admitted. "Everything I touch turns into a PR disaster." "You didn't touch a disaster," I said softly. "You touched me." That broke her. She leaned against the doorframe, covering her face with shaking hands. "I built this company from nothing, Riley. Do you understand that? Every inch of my success was carved out of sacrifice. I can't lose it now." "And what about us?" I asked. "Was that just collateral damage?" She looked up, her voice trembling. "You were never damage. You were the only thing that made me forget what damage felt like." We didn't speak after that. We just held each other, silently promising what we both knew we couldn't keep. A week later, Victoria resigned. The board forced her out under the guise of strategic restructuring. The press called it a scandal, a leadership crisis, a fall from grace. I called it heartbreak. I watched her pack up her office in silence. No one dared to help her. The same people who once praised her now avoided her eyes. As she carried the last box out, I followed her into the elevator. "This isn't fair," I said quietly. "They used you." "That's what power does," she murmured. "It makes people forget you're human." The elevator doors closed. The silence between us was unbearable. I wanted to tell her I'd quit, that I'd follow her anywhere, but before I could speak, she turned to me. "You can't come with me," she said. "You have to stay. You have a career to protect." "I don't want a career without you." Her eyes softened, but her tone stayed firm. "Then make one that means something. For both of us." When the doors opened, she walked out without looking back. The days that followed felt endless. The office changed overnight. New leadership, new rules, colder air. Coleman took over as interim CEO, and every smile he gave me felt like a threat. I kept my head down, focused on work, pretended not to notice the stares. But something inside me was shifting. I'd spent so long being quiet, small, safe. Loving Victoria had ruined that part of me forever in the best way. She taught me to stand up, to take space, to feel. So when Coleman called me into his office one afternoon, I was ready. He closed the door behind me and leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "You know," he said, "you could really make a name for yourself here now that Victoria's gone. If you play your cards right." My stomach turned. "What do you mean?" He shrugged, pretending to be casual. "You were close to her. Maybe you have some inside strategic weaknesses we can fix. Projects she was hiding. Anything the board could use." "I'm not betraying her," I said coldly. He smiled thinly. "Then I'm afraid you won't last long here, Miss Carson." I stood up. "Then fire me." He blinked, surprised. "Excuse me." "You heard me," I said. "Fire me. Because I'd rather start over than spend one more day helping people like you." I quit that night, packed my things, left my ID card on my desk, and walked out into the Los Angeles night. The city lights blurred through my tears, but for the first time the fear was gone. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew who I was. I didn't expect her to be waiting for me. Victoria was sitting on the hood of her car outside the building, wearing jeans and a leather jacket. I hadn't seen her look that unguarded in years. She smiled when she saw me. I smiled, like sunlight breaking through rain. "Let me guess," she said. "You told him to shove it." "Something like that," I said, laughing weakly. "How did you know?" "Because that's exactly what I would have done," she replied. Then softer. "Because you're becoming a little too much like me." "That's not possible," I said. "You're you." She stepped closer. "No. I'm just someone who's finally realizing that maybe power isn't everything." We stood there, the noise of the city around us, the air heavy with unspoken things. Then she whispered, "Come with me." "Where?" "Anywhere but here." We drove up the Pacific Coast Highway until the city disappeared behind us. The night stretched wide and open, waves crashing beside the road. She pulled over at a lookout point near Malibu, killed the engine, and let the silence settle between us. "I thought I lost you," she said. "You tried to," I replied, voice breaking. "You told me to stay." "I know," she whispered. "And I hated myself every day for it." I reached out, brushing her cheek. "Then stop running." For the first time, she let herself be vulnerable. She took my hand, holding it against her chest. Her heartbeat was fast and unsteady. "You make me want to start over," she said. "But I don't even know how." "Then we'll learn together." We stayed there for hours, just talking about everything and nothing. About her childhood in Chicago, her mother's expectations, her first love, her loneliness. She told me she used to paint before she built her empire. I told her I used to dream before I started surviving. And somewhere between laughter and tears, we found peace. Not the kind that comes after victory, but the kind that comes after surrender. Weeks later, we started something new. Not a relationship, at least not at first. A company. Small, scrappy, creative. She called it Haven Studio. "Because everyone deserves a place to belong," she said. We rented a modest loft downtown, filled it with secondhand furniture and more plants than sense. It smelled like coffee and paint and new beginnings. We hired women, queer folks, artists who'd been overlooked. We worked late nights, shared takeout dinners, and played music too loud. It wasn't perfect, but it was ours. Victoria was different here. Softer. She still had her sharp edges, but she laughed more, smiled easier. Sometimes I'd catch her watching me while I worked, a quiet pride in her eyes. And then one evening, while we were reviewing a client pitch, she looked up and said, "You know, I think I'm in love with you." I froze. "You think?" She smiled. "Fine. I am in love with you." "You're late," I teased. "I've been in love with you since the gala." She laughed, leaning across the table. "Then we're even." When she kissed me, there was no fear this time. No rules, no walls. Just two women who had finally stopped apologizing for who they were. Months later, Haven Studio became a quiet success story built, not from power or perfection, but from honesty. The same reporters who once called Victoria a scandal now called her a visionary. She never corrected them. She just smiled and said, "I had help." One night, after everyone had gone home, we sat on the rooftop, wrapped in a blanket, watching the city lights shimmer below. Do you ever regret it? I asked. Leaving, she said. Falling. She turned to me, her smile slow and certain. No. Because falling was the only way I ever learned to fly. And for the first time I believed her. We had walked through fire and come out holding hands. The world hadn't given us permission to love, but we loved anyway. And that, I realized, was the most powerful thing of all. The following months felt like the first breath after drowning. For once, our days weren't about damage control or pretense, they were about creation. We built campaigns that spoke truth instead of selling lies. Crafted stories for people who wanted to be seen, not sold. Haven Studio wasn't just a company. It was a rebellion with soft lighting and mismatched chairs. Victoria had changed. She still carried that natural command, but the sharpness in her voice had turned into quiet confidence. When clients questioned her leadership, she didn't raise her voice, she smiled, calm and unshakable, like a woman who no longer needed to prove her worth. But behind that calm, I sometimes caught glimpses of fear, especially when we got our first major offer from a corporate client tied to her old board. It was the same company that had ousted her months earlier. Are you sure about this? I asked as she read through the proposal. No, she said softly, but I'm sure about us. If I keep running from my past, I'll never own my future. She signed the contract that afternoon. That night, we celebrated with cheap wine and pizza on the office floor. The lights were dim, the music low. She leaned against me, head on my shoulder, hair smelling faintly of vanilla and ink. You know what's strange, she murmured. When I had everything, I felt nothing. And now that I've lost it all, I've never been more alive. Maybe you didn't lose it, I said. Maybe you just found what mattered. She smiled, tracing lazy circles on my wrist. You always know how to make sense of me. Someone has to, I teased. You're an emotional hurricane. She laughed, a sound I never got tired of hearing. But even happiness can feel fragile when you've known how easily it breaks. The scandal resurfaced 3 months later. A gossip blog published old emails, hinting that our new success was built on inappropriate favoritism and rekindled corruption. They used old photos of us at Silverline, twisted them into proof of deceit. The internet once again chose chaos over truth. I expected her to spiral, to close off, to retreat. But she didn't. Instead, she called a press conference. No PR team. No lawyer. Just her and me, standing silently beside her. She stepped up to the microphone, her voice steady. There was a time, she began, when I believed love was a liability, that being seen, being human, was a weakness. I was wrong. The truth is simple. I fell in love with someone I worked with. A woman. A brilliant, creative woman who made me want to be better, not richer. Not more powerful, just better. She paused, letting the room absorb it. Cameras flashed like lightning. I could hear the clicks echoing in my chest. This isn't a scandal, she continued. It's just a love story. And if the price of telling the truth is losing people's approval, then so be it. When she finished, the room fell silent for a heartbeat, then the applause came. Not everyone clapped, but enough did. Enough to feel like the world had shifted just a little. She reached for my hand under the table. I didn't let go. That night we went to the beach. No cameras, no lights. Just the ocean and the wind. The moonlight turned the water silver. The sand cold beneath our feet. We walked barefoot until the noise of the world faded behind us. I'm proud of you, I said. I'm proud of us, she corrected. You're the reason I had the courage. I smiled. No, you had it all along. You just needed someone to remind you. She turned toward me, eyes glistening. I used to think power was about control. Now I think it's about choice. And I choose you. Then she kissed Meslo, certain. A promise and a home all at once. We lay on the sand until dawn painted the sky pink and gold. The world was still messy, still uncertain. But in that quiet space between waves and morning light, it felt like enough. Time moved gently after that. Haven Studio grew not explosively, but steadily, honestly. We got letters from young women who said our work made them feel seen. From queer teens who saw our photo in a magazine and said, if they can do it, maybe I can too. Those letters filled our walls like constellations. Each one a reminder that love doesn't just change people, it changes the world around them. One afternoon months later, I found Victoria on the rooftop again, painting. She'd started painting again, just like she used to before Silverline. The canvas was half-finished, a skyline at sunset, colors bleeding softly into each other. "You're really good," I said, standing behind her. She smiled without turning. "I used to paint what I wanted people to see. Now I paint what I feel." I watched her brush move, confident and tender. "And what do you feel now?" She looked at me, her eyes warm. "Peace. Something I never thought I'd have." I sat beside her, resting my chin on her shoulder. "Do you ever miss it? The power, the luxury, the control?" She laughed softly. "I have everything I need right here." One evening, about a year after everything began, we threw a small celebration at the studio. Our friends, team members, and clients filled the loft with laughter and light. There was music, dancing, and far too much champagne. At midnight, someone turned down the music and started chanting, "Speech! Speech!" Victoria rolled her eyes but took the floor. She looked radiant in a black dress, hair loose, face glowing with the kind of happiness that didn't need to be earned. "Everyone here knows our story," she began, smiling at me. "You know where we came from, how we stumbled, fell, and somehow landed right side up. I want to say something simple. Success doesn't mean much if it's built on silence. And love, real love, deserves to be seen, even when it's hard, even when it's inconvenient. Especially then." The room erupted in applause. She looked at me, her expression soft. "And to Riley," she added, "the reason Haven has a heart." I felt tears sting my eyes as she raised her glass. To love, to truth, to finally being free. Later, when the guests had left and the city had gone quiet again, we sat on the couch surrounded by empty glasses and wilting flowers. She leaned against me, her head heavy on my chest. "Do you think we'll ever stop fighting?" I asked. "Maybe," she said, half asleep. "But I hope not. Fighting means we still care." Her words lingered in the quiet. I kissed the top of her head and whispered, "Then I'll fight with you forever." She smiled in her sleep. Years later, I'd look back on that night and realize something. Love didn't just change who we were, it redefined what we believed was possible. We weren't the scandal they painted us to be. We were survivors, dreamers, builders of something softer in a world obsessed with sharp edges. Victoria once said surrender could be beautiful. She was right. Because loving her wasn't about winning or losing, it was about letting go of everything that didn't matter and holding on to everything that did. On our 5th anniversary, we returned to that same Malibu lookout point. The wind was colder, our hair a little shorter, our hands a little more wrinkled from paint and years in life. But her eyes still had that fire, the same one that terrified and healed me all at once. She handed me a small box. Inside was a ring, simple, silver, engraved with 2 words, "My Haven." I laughed through tears. "You're not supposed to make me cry before the proposal." She smirked. "Then I'm doing it right." "Victoria, Riley," she interrupted softly. "You changed me. You made me brave in ways I didn't know existed. So this isn't a proposal. It's a promise. Whatever storms come, whatever people say, I'll choose you. Every time." I slid the ring on my finger, my voice breaking. "Then it's a promise I'll keep too." We kissed, the ocean roaring behind us like applause. And for the first time in my life, I didn't feel like I was falling. I felt like I was home. When people asked later how we survived it all, the rumors, the risks, the fear, I never knew how to answer. Because survival wasn't the right word. We didn't survive love. We lived it. It wasn't perfect. We argued. We made mistakes. We lost friends and found new ones. But through every twist, we chose each other again and again. And in the end, that's what love is. Not a fairy tale. Not a rebellion. Just 2 souls learning how to hold on, even when the world tells them to let go. The last thing I remember from that night was her voice as we watched the horizon fade into darkness. "Do you ever think," she whispered, "that maybe everything had to fall apart so we could find this?" I nodded. "I think falling apart was the only way we could fit together." She smiled, quiet and sure, and leaned in close. "Then let's never stop building." The waves crashed below, the stars flickered above, and between them, between all the noise and silence, we found our forever. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.